Thanks very much, Cesar and Stephanie, and thank you very much for coming here this morning. It's nice to be back in Bogota after a while, and I'm going to be talking about something quite important in today's digital age, which is the need to keep things personal, the importance of enhancing the human touch. Even though we're teaching online, maybe some teachers teaching exclusively online. How many of you teach online? Put your hand up. All of you, yeah? Not all of you. Okay. But imagine you want to touch the ceiling. People are very shy about putting their hand up. Yeah, okay. So it's about maybe 50%. Hybrid. Anyone teaching hybrid? Yeah, okay. So it's more people. Anyone teaching only face-to-face? Only face-to-face. Okay, so that's very few. That's interesting. Okay, so what we're going to look at today is important, and it's pretty much borne out from what I've just seen, that the majority of you are teaching at least some of the time online, and that has interesting repercussions for us, for teachers, and our role. So what we're going to look at today, first of all, we're going to look at teacher roles, where we've been. We're going to analyze the new roles teachers have to adopt in the digital age. Then we're going to look at the pandemic, what happened in the pandemic, and any shifts that have taken place. Then we'll look at the human touch, practical ideas for enhancing, for establishing the human touch in digital spaces. And then lastly, we'll go maybe look a little bit, if we have time, at AI and teacher roles and where we're headed. And that will be a good connection with the questions that you have asked me about AI. That will be a good link with that question and answer session. So first of all, teacher roles. I want to try to make it interactive. It's a big auditorium, this, where I'm like the expert, but I would like to get your input as well. So which roles, give me some roles that teachers adopt. Which roles do you think are the most important for you?
Facilitator.
Facilitator, okay, so that's a good one. The facilitator, yeah, that's maybe a new role, yeah? Any other roles you can think of? You can shout them out. Yeah. A motivator, yeah, okay. So I think you already know. Facilitator and motivator are roles which are becoming more important in the digital age, yeah? What are other roles?
Mentor coach.
Coach, who said that?
Mentor coach.
A mentor coach, yeah, mentor or coach. So there's two other roles there. Good. Any others? A guide, yeah. You're very good, yeah. You got all the right, all the most trendy roles. What about more traditional roles?
How about being friends? What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I think you should be friends with your students, absolutely, yeah. But it's not one of the principal roles. What's the traditional role of the teacher? Yeah? Two? A leader, okay, yeah, exactly. That would be a more traditional role. But what does a teacher do, for example, with the grammar? Explains, yeah. So the most traditional role of the teacher is the explainer or the manager, yeah? Managing, classroom management. Let's have a look at some of these roles here. Some of them we've mentioned: motivator, facilitator, manager, guide, and also model, yeah? Model can be, you can think of model in many ways. You can think of model as in model in terms of pronunciation, but also model in terms of, role model too. So this is has a double meaning perhaps. And this is Scott Thornberry from the A to Z of ELT. Look what he says about the traditional roles. Just read that. And it's interesting that as language teaching becomes more communicative, and we look at the concept of experiential teaching, the teacher becomes more a guide, a model, and a facilitator. So I think we can say that of those 6 roles, the 3 most traditional ones are explainer, manager, and model, and the 3 newer ones are guide, facilitator, and motivator. And we could also add coach to that. There are many, we actually adopt many roles, multiple roles in the class at any given time. But it's true that with the, in the digital age, with teaching online, it may be that some of the more traditional roles are less important. But we'll discuss that later. And this is, what's your name? The man with the beard. Yeah. Juan, he mentioned coaching. Remember, he mentioned coach and mentor. And coaching, from this great book, Philip Kerr's 30 Trends in ELT, number 29 is coaching. And I like what he says here, that coaching includes an acknowledgement of the teacher as motivator, confidence builder, and supporter. If the student is studying online, self-study, they need anything you do online, on your own, you need motivation and you need support. Otherwise, you feel very alone, right? And I really think this is important as a listener who is genuinely interested in their learners as individuals. Somebody said a friend, and yeah, Juan again. And this is also true. Getting to know your students on a personal level is extremely important. Perhaps more important now when you're teaching online than when you're teaching face-to-face. It's actually more important to get to know your students personally. So that's a very brief introduction looking at teacher roles, where we've been. And we're going to go and look forward as well. And we need to bear in mind these roles when we consider the relationship between teacher and student online. Let's have a look now at the pandemic. And I mentioned the pandemic because, well, why do you think it's important, the pandemic, when we're talking about online teaching? What happened in the pandemic to your classes? Huh?
Everything changed. Yeah. We had to face like virtual classes, virtual students, so there were like many challenges.
Exactly. There were many, all of you suddenly had to shift, yeah? That's why it's called pandemic shifts. You had to shift the way that you taught to a new context, to a new mode of delivery. And in May 2020, there's me. We did a round table on YouTube, Ask Me Anything. There's Matt from Cambridge University Press, Anne Robinson, Sarah Mercer. And we thought then that we would be going back to the language classroom quite soon, the face-to-face classroom. We didn't know the pandemic was going to carry on for longer. Sadly, it carried on a lot longer. And the interesting thing was that we were just talking about it and anticipating possible, making predictions. But what was interesting were the comments left on YouTube and Facebook. Here are a couple of the comments. It was broadcast live on Facebook. And look at the comments here from Jessica. She's talking about the socio-affective importance. So can you identify with that when you were teaching? How many of you teach adults? Adults. Okay, so yeah, about 50%. So particularly with adult learners, the whole process of suddenly shifting from face-to-face to online learning, for Jessica, it was clear that this was a form of contact that was very important, sort of on an emotional level. Yeah, can you identify with that, some of you? Yeah, yeah. And that is really interesting because that's when you realize that you're not just a teacher with a capital T, right? You are somebody else. You are a contact, someone that your learners can reach out to and that they can reach out to each other as well. And the pandemic kind of forced us to take on that role. Now there is no pandemic, thankfully. We shouldn't forget what happened, because obviously there were some negative implications for teaching too. But one of the positive implications was that many teachers, I'm not saying all teachers, but many teachers were able to establish a stronger personal contact with their students, ironically, online than face-to-face, because of the trauma of living through COVID, right? Here's another comment from people watching the debate. Here, Mark is saying, what's happening is really important. We need to talk about this, yeah? our role is changing, and we need to discuss this when we go back to face-to-face classroom. And these are, I think, I don't know about you, but you know when you watch videos and things online, sometimes it's more interesting the comments than the actual input, because the comments indicate how people are responding, yeah? And you can learn a lot from the comments. Here are some people I know. This is Lucy, who teaches in a secondary school. And notice here, notice here how positive she is talking about her profession. So she's teaching teens, and she's saying that even teaching teenagers, which was very difficult in the pandemic because often teenagers had their cameras off and things like that, she felt that what she had been doing previously in the face-to-face class was still relevant in the digital space. And that's also interesting because this reveals perhaps that some teachers believed that when they taught online, they would have to change everything, right? Oh, I have to change my methodology. Tengo que cambiarlo todo, no? And she's saying, no, I mean, actually, that's not the case. Good teaching, good pedagogy is good pedagogy, whether it's online or whether it's face-to-face. And that comment, I think, implies that. Now we're going to meet, Juan, we're going to meet your tocayo, okay? I met a teacher called Juan. We were in a conference together, and Juan, we were talking about teaching online. And I was very moved by something that Juan shared with me. And so I asked him to send me a video sharing his experience of teaching online during the pandemic. Okay? So I'm going to show you now what he said about a particular moment that happened while he was teaching.
Hi everyone, my name is Juan. I'm a teacherpreneur. I opened a company called Lifelong Idiomas and I work with teacher education. I've been a teacher trainer for a few years now, and Ben asked me to answer a couple of questions about teaching online and how personal it can get. I think that when we're teaching, it's very important for us to be able to connect with students. We need to understand how they're feeling and what it is that they're experiencing in our classrooms. And when we're teaching face-to-face, we tend to develop some skills to read students' emotions. So it's easier to read their faces and understand if they're following or if they need some help or if they're feeling a little bit desperate with the task at hand. And when we're teaching online, I think this gets a little bit harder. And because of that, I think we need to get more personal in order to be able to achieve the objectives of our lessons. It's more important to talk about how we're feeling because we need to put it into words in order to actually have access to how students are feeling. I personally have very good experiences online, and I find it even a little bit easier to open up to students, and I find they find it easier to open up to me as well. During the pandemic, unfortunately, I've had many losses in my family and among my circle of friends. And there was this one very special group that there were some students who were going through the same. And we had this beautiful moment when we just, I have the feeling that the lesson wasn't really going anywhere because there were all these feelings going on because of the trauma that we were going through together. And I just decided to open up about the losses I'd had, and so did students. And we had this, I think, liberating moment when we could just talk about our feelings and what we were actually thinking about and what was going on what was going on in our lives. I don't think I would have done that in a face-to-face lesson, because I think in a face-to-face lesson there are other things that I could do to make sure the lesson, the flow of the lesson wasn't, making sure there wasn't any obstacle to the flow of the lesson. And when I was teaching online, I think there is this need for us to be a little bit more vulnerable with our students. in order to connect better. So yes, I think when we're teaching online, it can be more personal. We should be more personal because we need to find ways to connect with students with all of this technology that is in front of us, you know?
It's very moving, don't you think? It's an incredible testimonial of that time. Now, he was teaching with adult students, probably in a very particular context where he felt able to open up about the losses he'd had during the pandemic. And to do that requires, he says, an element of vulnerability. I'm not suggesting that your classes are like therapy sessions, right? But it's true that the pandemic was a very special moment and these things happened to all of us. But what I find interesting about his testimony is how he says how it is much more important to get more personal online. It's what we said actually previously, that because of this supposedly inhuman or dehumanizing space, we have to break that dehumanization. We actually it's more important to make personal connections. And it's actually sometimes easier for students to make personal connections. So we can talk about it in the question and answer later, but there's been a lot of research done with students with chatbots, right? And there seems to be it seems clear that students are able to open up more to a chatbot than they are to a real person. And this is particularly teenagers who are, perhaps more worried about, they're more self-conscious. And I think this is very interesting. So it's almost as if the more dehumanized the space is, it is actually more possible to open up. And look what he says here. No, I'll just read. That's a very important quotation. Just read that again. Can any of you identify with that at all? That those of you maybe who taught adults in the pandemic, or even now, do you find that is something you can identify with? Yeah, some people are nodding, that you can get more personal with your students, or it's important to get. Anyone like to say anything related to that? Yeah, there's a chap there. ¿Tenemos otro micrófono, Benja, o no? No lo sé. Gracias. Is it that guy there with the glasses? There's a lot of people with glasses.
Hello, everyone. Bonjour. Yes, I'm the guy with glasses. Actually, you remind me an experience that I've had. It was in a face-to-face class, and it was with a student that I've had since the first levels. He was already finishing the course. And he was a teenager, so of course, during that time, there is a lot of things happening in life, and life seems sort of difficult, sorry.
Yeah.
And that student that I'm referring to, he told me that he didn't have anyone to talk in his house, and when he had a problem, when he needed an advice, he used to ask to ChatGPT what he should do.
Yeah.
So it broke my heart because, I mean, I am a young teacher, so I was there a couple years ago. So of course, the experience of not having anyone to talk to and just deciding to go to ChatGPT if you have a problem. Of course, that was a moment when I realized that I'm not just a teacher that is going to teach you how to use verb to be. Yeah. Sometimes you need to be, as you said, a therapy. Sometimes you need to be a friend.
You do, yeah.
So I can relate with that.
Thank you very much. What's your name?
David.
David, thank you very much, David. Very good. Yeah, I mean, yes, depending on who you're teaching, students may resort to speaking to any bot or digital assistant that they may find online. And obviously you're going to be, I think, a better interlocutor and listener than those bots. Let's move on a little bit. Here again, Scott Thornberry from the A to Z of ELT. Look what he says here. Kind of connected what David was talking about. Teachers play a pastoral role, a pastoral role, like a shepherd. They care for the learner's emotional well-being, and many teachers are also counselors, advising learners on how to improve and further their learning. The influence of humanist principles is validating this role of the teacher as another participant in the classroom ecology. Right? Muy bonito esto. Now, the idea that you are actually just you are a participant in the group rather than the leader, as we said before. So it may be that the roles that are going up, the roles that are, because of the digital age, it may be that the roles which are, let's say, becoming more important is this role of the coach and the carer, and students requiring more support as they study alone, but even emotional support. As I said, I think we need to be careful of this. I don't think it is necessary for lessons to be therapy sessions. I don't think that should be our role. But I think if you, depending on the rapport you establish with your students, in a given moment, if a student reaches out to you, particularly like the example that David said, then I think then you should respond. You should be able to respond. The feedback provider is also, I think, very, very important. We haven't looked at this, but students, when they're studying alone, they're studying online, they need feedback. And they need feedback from anyone. It could be you or from their assistant, but they need feedback desperately. Otherwise, you feel very alone online. And interestingly, this clicker is a little bit... Yeah, we said the motivator. So the motivator maybe is the most important role in digital spaces, as so many students are unable to self-regulate. So in order, sort of course like Evolve Digital, which I know, how many of you using Evolve Digital? Put your hand up. Really, really high. Okay, that's quite a good number. So if you're students unable to, in order to work with Evolve, a course like Evolve Digital, which is 100% online, correct? You have that communicative part with the PowerPoint slides, but the rest is self-study. Students need to be able to self-regulate, and you have to motivate them to do that. They're not going to, otherwise they're just going to sit there and just, pass one screen, another screen, another screen. And the manager, although the manager is a traditional role, you have to manage Zoom, right? You have to manage these interfaces. And when we first started in the pandemic, it was very difficult to manage, wasn't it? Because everything takes longer. Everything takes longer than in the face-to-face classroom. So management is still very important. Managing and organizing the online space, the communicative, synchronous space is extremely important. Okay. Oops. And roles that are on the way down, probably the role of the model is less important because students have multiple models around online, and they also may interact with digital models, bots and assistants. And the role of the explainer obviously is way down. If you're teaching Evolve Digital, you don't need to explain anything because everything is explained by the online course. You just have to clarify the grammar or whatever. But the explanations are done by the methodology, right? By the content. Okay, let's move on then to the human touch. We've looked at the roles, the traditional roles, new roles. We've looked at what changed in the pandemic. Now let's look at how we can enhance the human touch in digital spaces. So some positives from the pandemic, I think, are these. Now, I know not everything was great, and not every teacher was able to do this, but a good percentage of teachers were able to establish stronger connections with their students, increased empathy, and a greater sense of community. There was definitely closer collaboration between teachers, remember? Probably? Oh, I have to teach with Zoom. How am I going to do it? What is a breakout room? Do you remember? ¿Cómo lo organizo? No? It was a deep learning experience, and it was better that you were able to collaborate during that time. But that was very important.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Increase empathy, awareness of students as people.
Yeah, so a little bit what Juan was saying in the video, yeah? So when you're going through the pandemic, because of the trauma of the pandemic, you start the class and you say, what do you say when you start a class? Hello, everybody. How are you, no? How's the weekend? But during the pandemic, it was like, how are you? I mean, how are you, no? Closer connection, like, are you okay? Don't you remember that, right? Well, that was my online experience. But, suddenly your students are not just students. They are people who are going through the same thing as you. You know what I mean?
Sure. Awareness of students as people, how did you approach it? How could you approach it if you were not seeing their faces?
Well, I mean, a little bit what Juan is saying, no? The incredible thing about Juan's testimony is that online he was able to perceive that there was something wrong, or there was he just didn't want to teach. He felt there was something there, and that's incredible when you think you only can achieve that face to face, when you can actually see the people's faces. I mean, I can see now if you're falling asleep, or if you're looking at your phone, or if whatever, or if you're focusing, I can establish eye contact with you, right? Because we're face to face. Online, you don't have that. But even so, he was able to perceive there was something, and so he decided to open up, and that is this socio-emotional, socio-affective dimension. I'm not saying it happened to everybody, but it did happen to some people. And again, from the same book, Philip Kerr, the idea of well-being, sharing and caring. Have you heard of this? Beautiful phrase, no? Many of the ways personal well-being can be enhanced is by sharing and caring with others. So collective responses are more powerful than teachers working alone. And how can we enhance the human touch? So more practical ideas now. Did you notice, when I showed the video of Juan, where was Juan? Where was he? At home. How do you know he was at home? Yeah, he had like some things behind him, right? Like you could see a shelf, like a kind of toy, like some kind of red. I know you weren't focusing on that, but you remember, right? You know that some people, when they go on Zoom or something, they kind of change their background and they pretend they're in a mountain somewhere. I really don't like that because I'm actually really interested in where people live and some people are having to sit in their kitchen with their laptop, right? This is actually important because that personal space says something about you, right? And so we could, in order to enhance the human touch, we can exploit that online. So interact with your students' physical space. You can incorporate movement as well. Integrate real objects. Have you done this? This is a classic activity where you tell... Anyone done this? Yeah, this is buenísimo. You take an object, find an object that is meaningful for you or that has something you have some connection with, and the students talk about it. And that is so exciting online because it's live, right? The person is going, he gets the object, wait for like 10 seconds, gets the object, comes back with the object. And this is my, teddy bear that I've had since I was 4 years old, called Rufus or something, whatever. And this is really a way to enhance that personal connection, getting students using elements from their home. It's much more powerful than bringing it to a face-to-face class, isn't it? It's spontaneous. And lots of energizers, icebreaker tasks, so like little activities just to break, little warmers to break the, monotony maybe of just going through the PowerPoint slides or whatever you're using. And online polls, journals, just to test the group temperature, see how everybody is today. So how are you feeling today? And you have a list of adjectives, and you choose the adjective which most applies to you. And you've done things like that? Some of you? Yes, some of you are nodding, okay. All of these things help with the socio-emotional aspect. Some more ideas. Share something personal about yourself, yeah? So you take an object. If you want to do the show and tell, use yourself as a model. So it's, hi everybody, Today we're going to talk about souvenirs, something you bought somewhere that reminds you of a trip or a holiday or something you did, and you bring it and you show to the class and you describe it. And then the students discover something about you, and you could maybe share something. You share what you like. Obviously, you don't have to share things which are very personal, but you can share something which is meaningful to you, something that has value, right, to you. If you do that, the students will respond and will show you something that has value, right? Photographs, anything like that. Well, it's kind of just, this is not really rocket science, but I think it's important as ways of enhancing the human touch, being aware of emotional expression, including tasks that promote kindness. So accounts just talking about, some good news that happened to you, or something good that happened to you, or something that happened in the street, somebody helped you, or whatever, yeah? Just something positive. And using we and us instead of you and I is always very good. It's a very simple thing, but it's a very good way to enhance that human connection. And these kinds of tasks, these kinds of methodology, boosts awareness of learners as individuals and their different spaces, and validates the diversity of the context in which we learn. Many students, especially in the pandemic, and even so, had to share devices, yeah? They didn't have their own device, or they had to study, in the kitchen or something. And that is something that should be should empathize with. So in a sense, then, we're really looking here at social and emotional learning. These are examples. To enhance the human touch, we need to connect with our students on a personal level. So I'm going to give you, just to wake you up, a traditional gap fill, all right? What is social emotional learning? Well, it is a process through which we understand and manage exactly, emotions. It's not difficult, it's just to wake you up a bit. Set and achieve positive, or set a goal, feel and show empathy, establish and maintain positive attitudes or relationships, and make responsible decisions. You're very good with the collocations, very good. Yeah. But this is a process, okay? Obviously, you don't do this overnight. Gradually, it's extremely important online to be able to do these things, as Juan was saying, no? So let's look finally at, I was given 40 minutes, so we're coming towards the end. And this will connect to a little bit with the Q&A that we have planned, which is we're going to look a little bit AI now. We talked about the past a bit and how we can enhance online teaching. But what about the future? ¿Dónde vamos, no? Where are we heading now? It's true that the post-pandemic classroom is a bit like this, especially adult segment, okay? So we have the blended or flipped approach. So Evolve Digital is the classic flipped approach, okay? Aula inversa. It's a perfect example of a flipped approach. The students do all the work themselves. They go through the activities themselves, self-study, and then you activate that knowledge in a face-to-face, whether it's online or whether it's actually in a physical classroom, you activate that knowledge in communicative activities. This is the classic flipped approach. A greater emphasis on competencies. Rather than just me being a teacher, I need to teach critical thinking, I need to teach social emotional learning, I need greater awareness of inclusive practices. And, of course, AI and tech tools taking on a more significant role. And that's where we are right now. So if you look at that image, this is from a couple of years ago. What can you see in that image? It's kind of frightening, isn't it? Who is that green monster? Well, look at the teacher. No, I don't know if I can. I don't know where the thingy is here, but is this still key? No. Yeah, there we are. Who is the teacher? Look at the teacher. Fold defensively, arms folded, yeah? And the students are like... So who's the green monster? AI, yeah, exactly. And this comes from a long time ago, the beginning of AI. So that's almost 2 years ago now, or more than 2 years ago. A New York Times article. Remember at the beginning, everybody was saying, don't ban it, yeah? Now we've moved on from that because we know you can't ban it, right? It's impossible, prohibir. But at the beginning, we thought, oh, this is really bad. We better ban it. And this was how we've... it's interesting because this looks dated now. And that's because that's how fast technology moves. We can't ban it. We have to live with it and teach with it. And again, from 2 years ago, ChatGPT and the death of education, right? A lot of hyperbole, right? A lot of exaggeration. People getting hysterical about AI and giving TED Talks about it. But we don't talk about that anymore. Not in the same terms. In 2 years, we have come to terms with the fact we have to live with it, right? And this is a bit later on. Oh, no, still 2 years ago, things were changing. We need to figure out a way to adjust to these tools and not ban them. The adjustment won't be easy, but who better to guide students into the strange new world than their teachers? So there you go. That's your role as the guide. So now your role is changing again, and you are the guide, guiding your learners through the crazy world of AI or generative AI. We had this, of course, the question, does that make teachers unnecessary? This guy has 823,000 subscribers. There are lots of these gurus online. But again, the comments are more interesting than the guy himself. Look at this. See if you agree or disagree. You agree? Me too. I don't think it can change the fact that language is social. The social aspect of language is, undeniable. And again, more comments on that YouTube channel. Oops, sorry. Let me go back. This is a very sensitive clicker. Ay, Dios mío. And what's interesting about this comment is that I agree very much with, if you let ChatGPT do a lot of the technical stuff, in the same way you let Evolve Digital do the mechanical stuff, the technical aspects of learning, this frees up the class to focus on conversational development and relationship building. This is the flipped approach again. The communicative task at the end of the cycle in the flipped classroom enables you to do all of that good stuff. And you don't have to worry about explaining the third conditional, right? Because that's all done for you. And that focus allows you to focus on the tricky stuff or the more important stuff. And I love that, no? You'll never remember what ChatGPT corrects. Why? Because it's just so instantaneous. You're not going to remember that. But you'll always remember the teacher that helped you nail a job interview or inspire you. And that's why I like my job. Mm-hmm.
Sorry for interruption. Do you think it is bound to change in the not too distant future, the role of AI, for instance, in the classroom?
Do you think it will change?
The role of
of the teacher?
Sure, but you said that golden is supplement.
Yeah.
Supplement is golden.
Yeah.
Do you think it is prone to change in the not too distant future? Like it is not an absolute tool, but it's going to be like a facilitator as the teacher, perhaps?
it's going to, as a supplement already, it's a perfect supplement, right? Now, for you, I imagine, right? For most of you. More than a supplement. This is the danger. So we'll talk about this in the Q&A, but you're right. I think you need to maintain its role as a supplement. You don't want it to take over. And this is what we'll talk about in the Q&A. But no, it's a good question. We need to be able to, we need to be able to think of it as a way to help us save time, as a way to help us with admin, as a way to help us with all the boring stuff, lesson planning and things like that, as a supplement to, and we need to learn how to adapt to it. But this will come later when we do the Q&A. But yeah, it's golden as a supplement, of course. All generative AI is golden. Anyone who's used generative AI now realizes how incredible it is. And final quotation, this one a bit more recent, from last year, and I like this, no God in the machine. An AI model can be trained on billions of data points, but it can't tell you if any of these things is good or if it has value to us, and there's no reason to believe it will. In other words, it can't make value judgments, right? It just regurgitates what has already been said. It can't make value judgments itself. It doesn't have that level of integrity. We arrive at moral evaluations not through logical puzzles, but through considerations of what is irreducible. Subjectivity, dignity, interiority, desire, all the things AI doesn't have. That is, me parece estupendo esta cita. So final thoughts before we move to the QA. Teacher roles are evolving fast, and an awareness of this is more vital than ever, okay? So just showing you those headlines from a year ago or 2 years ago, you see how fast things are changing in the digital world. Our role in encouraging deeper learning is our strength. I believe we can reflect, empathize, and critique on a deeper level. We know what has value. And most importantly, we can feel. And I'll finish with this quotation from a Hungarian teacher, which some reflections from teaching during the pandemic. She says, looking back at these few months that she's talking about the pandemic, at all the challenges and new practices I wanted or had to implement, I can identify one single phrase that strongly resonates with this whole period. Sharing is caring. That phrase again. The sharing attitude of my colleagues and students became the driving force for me. All these gestures of sharing facilitated, that word again, facilitated the learning of my students, my colleagues, and myself. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. And now we can move on to the second part, which is the Q&A. So how would you like to do this? Let's look at the questions. What's your name? Sorry.
My name is Stephanie.
Stephanie, okay, good. So.
Perfect. So we have some questions for you. So I'm going to start with the first one, and it says, as artificial intelligence becomes increasingly integrated into online learning, to what extent can it enhance minimal human interaction? Or does it inevitably lead to a more impersonal educational experience?
Okay, intentaré en español. So maybe you should ask the question in Spanish.
All right, or maybe we can mix them if you want. Okay. A medida que la inteligencia artificial se integra cada vez más en el aprendizaje en línea, ¿hasta qué punto puede mejorar la interacción humana o solo se conduce a una interacción impersonal?
Yo creo que interacciones entre, por ejemplo, un chatbot y un alumno, un estudiante, inevitablemente va a ser más impersonal, porque es un ayudante digital. Eso creo que es innegable. Y creo que el problema es que todos estos bots ofrecen una visión del aprendizaje de idiomas como si fuera una cosa mecánica, ¿no? Cuando sabemos que aprender un idioma no es una serie de dominar, digamos, dar conocimiento específico, ¿no? Como de o sea, a ver, diseccionar el idioma en trozos, en partes. Sabemos que aprender un idioma no es así, no es mecánico, y es complejo, es dinámico y se basa en el contexto y en el uso. Pero el problema de Duolingo y todo lo que es, ¿no? Es que no piensa que aprender un idioma es así. Ellos, o estos bots o ayudantes o asistentes, ven algo en la única manera que ellos pueden responderte es a través, por ahora, es a través de pues consejos basado en, que tengo entendido, basado en un conocimiento, como basado en concepto del idioma como una cosa que se aprende como se podría aprender geografía o historia, otra asignatura, como una asignatura más. Y sabemos que aprender un idioma no es así. No. Y tenemos que intentar luchar contra eso. Dicho eso, obviamente, creo que va a ser más impersonal, pero mira lo que hemos visto en la charla. Curiosamente, y es contraintuitivo, parece ser que para muchos alumnos, sí ellos pueden responder de una manera más personal con un asistente o ayudante digital. Y ese es como la gran ironía. Yo no lo veo nada mal en eso. El hecho de que puede tener ese papel afectivo no me parece mal. Solo que los estudiantes no hay que obsesionarse con ese diálogo. Que para todos creo que tenemos que pensar que es algo suplementario, ¿no? Algo que suplementa, complementa lo que hacemos en el aula presencial, que sea virtual o sea, el aula sincrónica, que sea online o que sea face to face, ¿no? Pero es innegable que hay mucha gente que está beneficiando muchísimo y cada vez más de este tipo de diálogo, porque es verdad que estos bots van mejorando mucho, ¿no? Y es realmente variante la velocidad en que van mejorando. Y bueno, tenemos que entender que eso puede tener un papel muy importante para los alumnos, sobre todo los estudiantes que no tienen acceso, o sea, estudiantes que no tienen, que a lo mejor viven en comunidad rural, ¿no? Lejos de las ciudades, que no tienen acceso a dialogar con una persona. Eso es de gran ayuda. Siempre depende del contexto. Ha habido estudios muy interesantes de refugiados que siguen aprendiendo en situaciones muy difíciles, de desafíos tremendos, siguen aprendiendo, aprendiendo inglés o otras cosas a través de estos bots, por ejemplo.
La siguiente pregunta tiene que ver con la idea de que los profesores que usan recursos tecnológicos, pues prácticamente van a llevar como el liderazgo, ¿cierto? Entonces, la pregunta es, dada la continua evolución del aprendizaje digital, ¿qué habilidades esenciales deben desarrollar los educadores para mantener conexiones auténticas con sus estudiantes mientras aprovechan precisamente estas herramientas, las inteligencias artificiales y otros recursos digitales?
Esta es una muy buena pregunta y creo que las destrezas que hay que desarrollar tienen que ser destrezas que son parecidas, de hecho, de las destrezas que queremos animar dentro de los estudiantes. Pensamiento crítico es muy importante, lo que se llama pedagogía digital, digital pedagogy, que es cuando hay que usar estas herramientas digitales de modo efectivo y cómo usar inteligencia artificial en una forma ética. Esto es súper importante porque, como seguramente sabéis, mucho del contenido de AI, de inteligencia artificial, origen de esa información que saca gran parte es de Estados Unidos, en inglés, tiene los sesgos típicos de estos datos. Entonces, ya sabemos que, porque lo pone, ¿no? ChatGPT, a veces ChatGPT, ¿por qué pone? ChatGPT sometimes doesn't tell the truth, ¿no? ¿Qué es lo que pone? Como que a veces puede producir datos erróneos o algo así, ¿no? Hay como un disclaimer. Pero más que eso, no es que se equivoca, claro que se equivoca y se alucina, hallucination, pero más que eso son los sesgos del bias, ¿no? Que tiene. Y esto es muy importante, sobre todo, si tú estás preguntando a un chatbot, corrígeme, o sea, estás teniendo un diálogo con el chatbot o el ayudante y el chatbot te corrige y te manda feedback. Yo no veo ningún problema en eso. Eso es muy, muy beneficioso para un estudiante. Pero una vez que empiezas a hablar de temas, contenido de interés cultural, global, quién sabe lo que va a sacar, ¿no? Y esto es muy peligroso, porque eso está alimentado por todo ese contenido, volcado a la red, gran parte en inglés de Estados Unidos, y conlleva todos esos sesgos. Y bueno, hay que estar muy, muy atento con esto. Entonces yo creo que identificar, se dice sesgo, ¿no? Bias, sesgo. Yo creo que la destreza de identificar estos sesgos es una destreza que todos los profesores tienen que desarrollar. Y también yo creo que hay que cambiar el mindset, un poco la mentalidad. Porque ahora mismo yo creo que estamos inmersos en esta idea de que, bueno, el AI, AI lo hace por mí, ¿no? Eso lo dejo al AI porque ahorra un montón de tiempo. No hay que pensar, AI will do the work for me. No va a trabajar para mí, sino hay que trabajar con ella, adaptarse a ella. So don't let it take over. Work with it. No deja que te controle, pero colabora con ella. Eso, y claro, el arte de trabajar bien con la inteligencia artificial es a través de los prompts, ¿no? Entonces, otra destreza obvia es el arte de diseñar y escribir estos ¿cómo se dice? Prompts. No tiene traducción, no.
Digamos que en la cultura educativa colombiana todavía está muy presente el tradicionalismo, ¿cierto?
Yeah.
El estudiante todavía llega a clase esperando que el profesor le enseñe todo, como que cumple un rol muy tradicional. Entonces, bien sabemos que hay muchos recursos digitales ahorita, pero a veces los estudiantes demuestran muy poca curiosidad como de explorar esos recursos y trabajar de manera autónoma esos componentes formales de la lengua. Entonces, ¿de qué maneras o cómo podríamos despertar en los estudiantes la curiosidad acerca de las inteligencias artificiales y de los recursos tecnológicos para aprender estos aspectos más formales de la lengua, como que adquieran esa autonomía para que efectivamente en el salón podamos trabajar más en el aspecto comunicativo?
Bueno, yo sí, creo que la curiosidad, los alumnos tienen curiosidad por la tecnología en sí, ¿no? Obviamente. TikTok, ya todos saben hacer TikTok videos y editarlos y crear y meter memes y emojis y no sé qué. Yo diría que el problema a veces es que los alumnos se tienen como su ocio, lo que es el uso de tecnología para el ocio, que es el TikTok, no sé qué, y el uso de la tecnología para lo que es aprender cosas, ¿no? Yo creo que una forma de animarles que tengan más curiosidad es pues, pues para deberes, hazme un video TikTok de esto, ¿sabes? De que incorpora a ellos que trabajan con esto, que graban sus propios videos, o que el profesor dice, bueno, para que cada persona puede decidir cómo quieren hacer este proyecto, que puede ser con PowerPoint, diapositivas, slides, puede ser grabar un vídeo, puede ser escribir un texto. Darles más libertad, más elección, más autonomía, que ellos elijan. Porque el problema a veces es que no tienen curiosidad porque el profe dice, bueno, esto es como hay que hacerlo y ya está, y punto, y limita. Hay tantas maneras de comunicarse hoy día, tantas herramientas digitales, que quizás es una idea que se me ocurre ahora mismo. Pero deberían saber, yo creo que deberían saber la increíble cantidad de tiempo que se ahorra con la inteligencia artificial. Yo creo que deberían saberlo, pero si no saben, habría que decírselo, porque en la misma manera que nos ahorra tiempo a nosotros, también ahorra tiempo a los profesores también, a los alumnos también. Le puede dar más independencia y más autonomía la inteligencia artificial. Y eso es otra manera de quizás de que pueden usarlo de manera más creativa. Yo os animo a hablar claramente, puede ser en español, no pasa nada, de esto. Es mejor ser transparente, ¿sabes? Y decir, mira, ya soy consciente, ¿no? de la situación en la que vivimos. Yo sé que cómo os puede ayudar todas las inteligencias artificiales, pero ¿no? Vamos a hacerlo de manera sensata, ¿no?
Yo tengo, no es tanto una pregunta, sino es como una inquietud. Digamos que los desarrollos en ELT, en educación, también puede ser una crítica, digamos que espero sea constructiva. ¿En qué medida, digamos, tienen en cuenta el trabajo interdisciplinar, como la combinación de saberes, ¿sí? La combinación de saberes que afectan esos desarrollos para que en últimas sean productos pertinentes, adecuados, atinentes, ¿sí? Y creo que aquí se vuelve más una crítica que una reflexión, y es que, por ejemplo, Ben como investigador tiene en cuenta, digamos, disciplinas o enfoques. A mí se me ocurre, por ejemplo, la etología humana. ¿Por qué? Porque básicamente antes, pero sobre todo después de la pandemia, el comportamiento ha cambiado ostensiblemente. La tecnología, la inteligencia artificial, digamos, están generando ajustes, arreglos y desarreglos en todo ámbito. Entonces, y eso digamos que es una tradición de décadas, pero se agudizó en la pandemia, ¿cierto?
Sí,
definitivamente. A mí se me ocurre, por ejemplo, que estos desarrollos tendrían que estar conectados por disciplinas. Una de ellas puede ser la etología, porque el comportamiento ha cambiado, y obviamente si el comportamiento cambia afuera, cambia dentro del salón de clase, el tema de la socialización, o por ejemplo el tema de la neurociencia, neuroplasticidad, neuronas espejo, que se presume, digamos, tiene un efecto muy relevante en el aprendizaje, pero en lo que nos hace humanos, ¿sí? Y podría mencionar, por ejemplo, la ecología, que la vi acá, y la ecología vista, por ejemplo, desde la perspectiva más integral, no desde la relación del sujeto con el medio ambiente, sino más bien desde la relación del sujeto con otros sujetos, con la intervención de la tecnología y la inteligencia artificial, que esas relaciones sean armónicas y balanceadas, cosa que no pasa hoy en día, porque vemos que la tecnología y la inteligencia artificial juegan muy a favor en los desarrollos, pero a su vez están jugando en contra, si se quiere, desde la composición, la configuración de sociedad del mundo. hay retrocesos en todo sentido. La pérdida del contacto por el abusivo uso de la tecnología es innegable, ¿sí?
Lo que llamamos el de-skilling en inglés.
Definitivamente. Es decir,
¿Cómo se llama eso? Esa es una palabra muy importante, el de-skilling. Cuando, o sea, cuando pierdes la destreza de hacer algo porque la tecnología lo hace por ti.
Sí.
No sé, pero en
Sure.
inglés, de-skilling.
Sí.
Sí, yo estoy de acuerdo contigo, ese es el mayor riesgo
que existe. Claro, entonces parece que en los últimos años, en las últimas décadas, sobre todo exacerbado por la pandemia, la humanidad ha perdido humanidad.
Sí, sí.
Y la educación es un llamado, digamos, a integrar esas disciplinas desde, digamos, de un enfoque muy personal, lo considero, pero no veo que haya tal articulación de disciplinas, de componentes, de ciencia, con, digamos, las consecuencias que eso tiene, ¿sí? Las consecuencias, creo que nefastas, que incluso está comprometiendo la vida en el planeta. O sea, digamos, esa es la influencia negativa de la tecnología y de la inteligencia artificial. Entonces, la pregunta concreta, más es una pregunta, es una inquietud. ¿Será que nos falta integrar, volver como un tema muy de simbiosis, como de sinergia de diferentes disciplinas o saberes, para que esos desarrollos lleven, digamos, pertinencia, sean atinentes y sobre todo vayan al ritmo de la evolución en la que está, digamos, o la que está sufriendo la sociedad? ¿Por qué? Porque básicamente la educación, y el TI no es la excepción, creo que es llamada a tratar de abordar el problema desde una perspectiva muy responsable, porque ¿qué otro ámbito diferente a la educación para abordar esto de manera, digamos, sostenible, de manera viable y de manera pertinente? Entonces,
bueno, yo creo que intentamos, o sea, yo comparto tus inquietudes, o sea, totalmente, 100%. Y bueno, Cambridge, yo creo que yo solo puedo hablar de mí. Yo soy autor de un método, pero yo considero que Cambridge, por ejemplo, sí están intentando, como sea, incorporar muchas de las destrezas de que un ser humano hoy día tiene que tener en el mundo en el que vivimos. Yo creo, por ejemplo, una de las competencias de las life competencies es la social responsibility, responsabilidad social de cada alumno. Entonces, no podemos como pasar un método entero sobre esto, pero podemos intentar incorporar estas competencias, la sostenibilidad. Por ejemplo, la nueva edición de Evolve saldrá el año que viene y hemos incorporado muchísimo más input, muchísimo más contenido basado en sostenibilidad. Y eso es realmente lo que... O sea, que puede parecer un poco superficial, pero que al menos estamos intentando incorporar estos elementos para que es un curso de inglés, sí, pero que a la vez hay que tener en cuenta todo esto, la dinámica, ¿no?
Lo que entiendo, Ben, es que lo estamos incorporando, digamos, de manera gradual y puede ser superficial, pero han pensado, digamos, que dentro de, o en un tiempo, eso se vuelva... Te voy a poner un ejemplo, la desintoxicación de la tecnología, ¿sí? Tenemos que ser tan insistentes en el uso de la tecnología como en la desintoxicación tecnológica. Y digamos que eso ya lleva componentes de software u otros componentes que deberían llevar o dispositivos o elementos que nos permitan también alejarnos de esa tecnología.
Sí. Es interesante. Hay una cosa, un dato curioso, César, que nosotros pensamos en el segmento adulto, y mis compañeros seguro que estarán de acuerdo conmigo, nosotros pensamos en el segmento de adulto, o sea, jóvenes adultos, después de la pandemia realmente pensamos que ya se acabó el mercado, que todo iba a ser digital, el mercado tradicional, convencional, ¿sí? El formato impreso de un libro, el concepto del libro y todo lo que implica el libro, ¿no? Pensamos que nadie iba a comprar más libros, que ya está, que todo va a ser pantallas y todo rollo digital. Y no ha sido así. De hecho, y hay muchas instituciones como lo de usted que sí que usa Evolve Digital, que es 100% digital, y lo bueno de Evolve es que es súper flexible, entonces se adapta a la institución y sus propias necesidades. Pero curiosamente, en el mundo, lo interesante de Evolve es que es un producto global. Se vende en Japón, se vende en Colombia, se vende en Turquía, se usa en todos estos mercados, en todos estos países. Curiosamente, hay un movimiento a volver al formato impreso. ¿Verdad que sí? Que no lo imaginamos, que no lo predecimos. Y eso a mí me indica que hay instituciones que reconocen la necesidad de desintoxicación digital
o tecnológica.
Porque el libro, el mero hecho de tener en la mano un libro es muy distinto, porque por toda la relación social afectiva que tiene el libro. Es como el papel, ¿no? El papel que tiene. Seguimos haciendo esto, ¿no? Mira. Y yo también, con mi papelito, con mis apuntes, mi chuleta, ¿no? Esto porque es más humano, es más accesible, no sabemos por qué, pero que también creo que sin darnos cuenta también luchamos contra la pantalla, ¿no?
Sí, es solo esa inquietud que planteo.
Sí, no, es muy buena.
Definitivamente creo que hace falta la interconexión
estoy
saberes.
totalmente de acuerdo contigo y te lo puedo garantizar que yo también tengo las mismas inquietudes y es un constante desafío realmente mantenerse al pulso, ¿no? Pero no, tienes toda razón, el peor es el de-skilling. Ese es el peor que nos puede pasar, que convertimos como víctimas, ¿no? Víctimas, que nos dejamos de pensar, ¿no? Y eso sería lo más triste. Sí, tenemos que parar. Sí.
Y ya necesitamos terminar porque hay otro evento.
Sí. Benjamín, tienes que elegir una persona. O alguien con micrófono, ok. También, sí, ok, sí.
Bueno, buenas tardes. Pues para concluir sería bueno una pregunta acerca ya propiamente de los estudiantes, que es, hay personas que dicen, si ya hay inteligencia artificial, si ya hay una máquina que hace todo por mí, ¿por qué yo tengo que aprender un idioma? ¿Cómo podemos superar o qué podemos decir y concientizar para que pues eso se entienda que no es verdad, que es importante tener estas habilidades? ¿Qué podemos o cómo podemos guiar a nuestros estudiantes para esto?
Bueno, yo creo que un poco, quizás lo que he dicho en la charla, enfatizar el papel social del idioma. Sé que es innegable que aprender un idioma no es como aprender geología, ¿no? O sea que es 100% social y todo el aspecto socioafectivo y socioemocional que también mencioné, el aislamiento que tuvimos en la pandemia, ¿no? Todo el mundo nos acordamos de eso, ¿no? Y cómo nos frustramos y cómo lo triste que era. Y era precisamente porque no pudimos desarrollar nuestra vida social normal. Y estuvimos todos encerrados en casa. Es un buen ejemplo para, pues, si tú solo quieres aprender idioma para hablar con el bot, aísla mucho. Y quizás en tu casa y solo con esto, eso no es comunicar realmente. Y intentar vincular a los alumnos a eso, a cómo se socializa, cómo usan el español colombiano, ¿no? Cómo se relaciona con la importancia del idioma ya de comunicación en su vida normal. Y ellos, yo creo que fácilmente sabrán que el inglés es lo mismo, o sea, hablar inglés es igual que hablar español, quiere decir que hace falta el contacto social.
Sorry, man, we have to go right away. Sorry.
Who said that? Oh, Cesar.
Sorry.
Yeah.
There is another event here. We have
yes,
to go.
we have to go.
We really appreciate you having
thank
chosen
you.
Canadian College as an institution for this event to take place. So
thank you to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for
Thank you.